but it's not burning. And he goes up to it, and a voice starts to speak out of the bush. Tells him, take your shoes off, you're on holy ground. Okay. Now he's having a God experience. And when you read throughout the Bible, how many times the prophets we read about have a God experience? Okay. Now, this person who's speaking to him out of the bush, Moses didn't know at the moment exactly that this is the creator of the universe. Okay. And the Bible says that Moses was the humblest man on the earth. Do you think that experience at the bush might have been contributing to that? That made him really get humble? God has taken time out. And when we think about, I just got thinking about the universe this morning. I was thinking about this lead in this morning. Do you all have any idea how big the universe is? Okay. Light travels at 186,000 miles a second. 186,000 miles. The Earth's circumference is like 28,000 miles roughly. If you went down the equator and did a lap around the Earth, that's 28,000 miles. That means light could go around the Earth. Let's say it's 30,000. It would go around the Earth 6 times, is that right? 6 times in 1 second. Light will travel around the Earth basically 6 times in 1 second. Okay. That means light travels 11,160,000 miles per minute. It travels 669 million miles in an hour. 669 million miles in an hour. We think 100 miles an hour is pretty quick. 100 miles in an hour would be a jet, modern jets. When we flew to Israel, that jet we were on was getting pretty close to the speed of sound. It was 720 or 30 miles an hour because it caught a good tailwind. 700 miles an hour, that's clocking. 700 miles an hour. Light travels 669 million miles in an hour. Okay? It takes light from the sun to reach Earth, it takes 8 minutes. That means when you actually see the sun dip below the horizon, it's already 8 minutes past that. That's just the tail end of the light getting to us as it disappears. It's already gone. That means light travels 16 trillion miles a day. No, I'm sorry, 16 billion miles a day. It's 482 billion miles in 30 days. It's 5,865,696,000,000 miles in a year. It's basically, just rounded off 6 trillion miles a year as a light year. That's why when we watch these movies and we see Star Trek, they go into warp 10. They're not even traveling at the speed of light. There's nothing faster than the speed of light in the universe. That means even if you could travel the speed of light, do you know how big the universe is? From one edge to the other is 28 billion light years. for light to travel that distance is the number 168, followed by 23 zeros, which is 16 septillion, 800 sextillion, with all a bunch of zeros behind it. The order of numbers is million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, sextillion, septillion. We're talking a number that is absolutely incomprehensible. That means, I'm boring you with my math. If we measured in yards, a milliyard would be 1,000th of a yard. A microyard would be 1,000,000th of a yard. A nanoyard would be 1,000,000,000th of a yard, and a picoyard would be 1,000,000,000th of a yard. In the universe, we are a picospeck on a nanospeck in relation to the universe. We're a speck of dust on a speck of dust compared to the size. The earth is the teeniest, tiniest little speck of dust compared to the size of the universe. We are so itsy bitsy teeny weeny. I mean, from 30,000 feet, have you ever looked down from 30,000 feet from a jet? How small everything is just from 30,000 feet? Imagine how far away we are, a light year from here. How the earth looks. Not 28 billion light years. We're nothing. And God created this. And the God that created this is talking to Moses from a bush. You're going to be sucking wind. You go, yes, God. No, God. Yes, sir. No, sir. And that was Moses' God experience. And right after he has this, God says, this is what I want you to do. And he's stuttering and stammering. I can't do that. I can understand why he'd be saying, I can't do that because I just talked to this guy right here in this bush. There's no way itsy bitsy nothing me can possibly accomplish that. God says, no, you're going to accomplish it because I'm going to do this. It's like, have you ever seen the movies where this little dog comes bouncing up and he goes, bear, 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 bear. And there's this massive dog in front of him and he turns and runs. And the little dog goes, yeah, I did it. And looks back and here's this other big dog behind him that he didn't know was there. And the other dog saw. That's how we are. We're going to be these prophets that go up and go, ba, 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 ba. And it doesn't matter because there's this big thing behind us. It's backing us up.
Glory. Hallelujah.
And when we go out, as we operate in this prophetic thing, right? We're going to be this little itsy bitsy picospeck. But we have a gargantuan somebody standing behind us. Right? You and God is the majority, right?
Yeah.
We take what we have, we place in his hands and let him deal with it. So, 80 years into this, God says, this is what you're going to do. And he's hesitant. He says, that's okay. I'm going to get your brother involved. He's already on his way to meet you. And they meet and they hug and say, hey brother, how you doing? Hey, things are good. How's it going back in Egypt? Oh, it's pretty bad. God's going to deal with it. What? Yeah. God's fitting to do something. So they turn around and go back to Egypt. And we went through the story. All the signs and wonders. God defeats every one of their gods. He smushes them like a bug on a windshield. Splat. Nothing left. I mean, he steps on every one of their gods, all the way up to Pharaoh, taking the firstborn. And Aaron's right there with him. They're Mutt and Jeff. They're apostle and a prophet kind of thing we talked about. And they confront Pharaoh, confront Egypt. They get let out. And they're a tag team. They're working together. Miriam, she gets involved. Some gets in trouble. Aaron does some things, gets in trouble. But, you know, we all make mistakes. And thankfully, we've got a God understanding that we're this picospeck on a nanospeck in the middle of the universe. He knows how little we are. And he still uses us, right? If we're willing, right? And so when people begin to complain about you and your behavior and how you come up and say things that are from the Lord, and they're going to be critical of you, well, that's part and parcel of it. That's part of it. But God defends and vindicates his prophets, and prophets get to do miracles. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. You know, and all through the desert, you know, he's having to deal with all these aggravations. These stiff-necked Israelites, hard-headed, and they had to be tuned up all along the way. All along the way. Oh, you don't like that? Take another lap. Take another lap around Sinai. Yeah, go ahead. You're going to come to love that sand before this is all over with. Take another lap. Eat some of that sand dust. Here's some water. Take a drink. Take another. You don't like the quail? Take another lap. You getting tired of the manna? I could take it away, but no, I'll take another lap. You know, over and over. And all the way through, we see them dealing with the challenges and getting a better understand how to be managers. And, you know, Moses' father telling him you need to delegate, you need to learn how to delegate a little bit and do it all yourself. And Miriam, you know, she kicks up a fuss and has to go out of the camp because she's got leprosy on her. Aaron somehow skates again. But and it gets all the way to the end, and we're reading all this, and not once do you ever see Moses pound his chest and say, look, I'm the leader, I'm in charge, I am a prophet, I'm an apostle, you will do what I say. He never comes out like that. He's always, you know, a fuss raises up, what's he do? He hits the dirt, crying out to God. Yeah. He didn't respond, you know, I'm this and I'm that. You never hear anything out of his mouth like that. Had to deal with Korah's rebellion. Got to see the earth swallow some people. And on and on. And then finally, Moses doesn't get to go in the promised land because he, instead of speaking to the rock, he struck it. And God said, because you didn't listen, you didn't do that. You don't get to go in. And neither did Aaron. Aaron didn't get to go in either. But it gets all the way to the end. And at the very end, it says that Moses was a prophet. Not until the end does it say that. And you know, the Jews hold him in high esteem. I learned that one day over in Knoxville. Because we went over there, all these instruments we got back here, we got from a Jewish man, most of those back there. We got from a Jewish man who was a professional musician, and he was getting ready to go back to Israel, and he didn't want to truck it all back over there, so he decided to sell it, and Myra found it on Craigslist. And so we went over to his house, and we started picking stuff out. We'll take this, we'll take this, we'll take this. And I cracked my usual little joke about, you know who the most wicked man in the Bible is? He's Moses. Most people don't know that. Because he broke all 10 commandments at the same time. I said that joke. Oh no. This Jewish man went into vapor lock. And Myra said, he didn't like that. And I went, oh, sir, I apologize. I really don't mean to, be ugly about Moses. It's just a joke, and I apologize. He said, I'll let the humor subside. He said, I understand you're trying to do humor, but he did not appreciate my joke because they hold Moses in very high esteem. Because, if it hadn't been for this little baby that just somehow his mom put in a basket, that just somehow got picked out of the water by Pharaoh's daughter, that somehow just grew up in the house of Pharaoh, that somehow realized he couldn't do this anymore, and he started to defend his brethren and killed a man, went off in the desert, somehow ran to God, somehow came back, got the children out of Israel, somehow got them into the promised land, where a few thousand years later, a Messiah would come from. All started back there in that basket in the water by this man who was able to be God's tool to get all this accomplished. So I said all that to say this. Myra, it's your turn. Unless I forgot something I need to cover.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where does it say, when you said he said Moses was a prophet, where is that?
Myra's going to tell you that.
Oh gosh.
I hand off the ball. I pass the baton to Mariam.
You can just stay up there.
Huh? No, I'm gonna sit.
My glasses out of the pocket of my purse.
So, in answer to the question, where is that? We've been trying to go through all the references to Navi, the Jewish word for prophet, and the word Nava, which is actually the root, because that's what the experience of a prophet is, that ecstasy, that frenzied experience with God, those moments. And thought it was interesting that the Bible did not call Moses a prophet. And we found Aaron, we found Abraham, and then we found, was Aaron second? I think Aaron was second. And we haven't done Miriam yet, but she's actually mentioned as a prophetess. And, but you have to when you look at these, the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are all about Moses. 4 books out of the 5 in the Torah are about Moses. And it's at the very last paragraph of Deuteronomy. It's believed that Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and where Moses was one day with God and he said, show me your face. He said something like that. And God said, I can't do that, but I will show you my 100 parts. That what God was actually saying, Moses might have been saying, show me the future. Show me your face, or what your face is looking at. And he said, no, but I can show you this. And he showed him the revelation of the history of the Jewish people from Adam on. And that's how they believe that. That's how Moses wrote The first 5 books of the Bible was through that moment of revelation. And if you look, there's places where it actually says that Moses wrote. I don't know that I wrote that down this week, but I don't think I did. There's a place I saw this week where it says that Moses wrote, he did this, then he wrote this, and then in the morning he did this and that. So we know he could write, and it wasn't that common for people to be able to write back then. So he wrote all of this, and I was trying to find, and then they believe that after Moses' death, someone else wrote these final 1 or 2 chapters of Deuteronomy, that they kind of took what Moses had written and finished it by adding a few chapters. I'm sorry I didn't prepare for that question, because I'm not seeing that word. Let's see.
What word?
Prophet in that last paragraph of
34:10.
Is it 34:10? Yeah, thank you. So that's where it is. So you see, it's actually, yeah, the last 3 verses of the entire Torah recognizes him, even though 4 of those books are about him. He was the most humble, meekest man on the earth. He would never call himself a prophet, because he felt like that was too huge of an honor, I guess, to call himself that. And so the people who finished his writings said, and in Israel there has not risen a prophet since like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face in all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh, to all his servants, to all his land, in all that mighty hand, and in all the great awe which Moses showed in the sight of all Israel. Wow, that's huge. That's kind of like your obituary, It's kind of like they were writing his obituary. This is what Moses was. He knew God face to face. He was no prophet was greater. In all these signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh, to all his servants, to all his land, in all that mighty hand, and in all that great awe which he showed in the sight of everyone. That's cool, pretty cool obituary, wouldn't it be? So that's the last mention, and in order to really delve into Moses, then you've got to back up from that, and you've got to look back through all of this in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and it's way too much for us to be able to cover. You could easily spend a year on that, just looking at all these different aspects of him. But just for today, a couple things that were on my mind were, it's interesting to me the importance of women in Moses' life, because first of all, you've got a Pharaoh who's saying, kill all the babies. He's told the midwives, kill all the babies, and they are supposed to do this, right? They're at risk of losing their own lives if they don't do it. And so, but they take that risk, and then they make an excuse and say, oh, the babies come too fast, we can't get there. But those midwives saved Moses' life at birth. When you look at prophets, they have some kind of notable, memorable birth, childhood, or youth event. There is something about their life in the young years that was so notable and memorable that it's almost like God already had it woven in them to be a prophet, and you can see where either the enemy tried to kill them because they had the gift of prophet, or somebody, did this or that, or they had an early experience with God, like Jeremiah, a very early experience with God. And remember Abraham, when we were studying him, we saw that if you translate the Hebrew correctly into English, it says, I think it's Genesis 12, it says that God had said to Abraham, leave your family and leave your father, leave your family, leave your city and go to a place. And that appears to have been at a very young age. And his father kind of said, no, we're going to stay here in Ur. And then he said, no, if you go, I'm going with you. So he must have been so young that his father felt he had to go. See what I mean? That was our first prophet in the Bible. So anyway, the other thing about this was Moses' mother, Jochebed. Wow. I want you to think about when you have your children. Now, so her son gets saved. She's already got a daughter who's probably 5 to 7 named Miriam. She's already got a little toddler, Aaron. I think if I read it correctly, that Aaron might be a couple years older. So she's got this. We don't know if there were other children, but we know for sure about Miriam and Aaron. And now she's having Moses under the threat of death from Pharaoh. I can't help but think and wonder if she had an experience with God. How could you come up with an idea to put your baby in a basket in a swamp?
Yeah.
Now, I'm telling you, It was a swamp. It was probably clear water, but there were reeds in it. What does that sound like? You know our swamps around Tennessee, they grow reeds. And there was a place where the women went down to bathe, right? Because Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe. So it had probably been real clear water, and it would have been shallow. You know, our bathtubs, we fill it up, 12 inches, probably the most, when we take a bath. So it had to have been probably shallow. And, where'd you get an idea like put your baby in a basket in the swamp where a dignitary is going to come out there and could kill the baby? Why didn't she just keep the baby at home and try to hide him till he was old enough? What she was doing was actually God was working through her to get permission to keep him. That's what was going on here. Because who could give her permission to keep him? Could Pharaoh's daughter give her permission to keep him and not have to have him killed? Yeah. So here you got Jochebed, the mom. She's extraordinary. And when she's not called a prophetess, but when we get on down in the story, on up in Exodus, when they come out of the Egypt, it calls Miriam a prophetess. So we've got this little girl, this 2-year-old, and we got a new baby, and this mama, all her kids are prophets. I don't know another place in the Bible where you've got a literal family of prophets. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I think that is so awesome that a mom could raise 3 prophets. Yeah. In modern days, I think about John Wesley and his brother. I can't remember his brother's name, but that was in the 1700s maybe? John Wesley and Charles Wesley from England were extraordinary men of God. The Methodist denomination was founded because of John Wesley. They broke away from other Protestant denominations. So those 2 men I would consider to possibly be a prophet. And that family, if you study the family of the Wesleys, there's other people in the family. Some of the women even were in ministry and stuff. So that's a modern day. But here we got this family where all these 3 kids are prophets. So that's really cool. And how God even puts the same calling on all 3 of them. Isn't that exciting? Mm-hmm. God put the same calling. You as a family, you're going to lead my people, my 1 million of slaves out of a country that are abusing them. In a way, it would take a family to do something like that. So you got the midwife, you've got Jochebed, and then you got Miriam. And I would really like somebody to study Miriam and share that with us more, because she was a minstrel prophetess. She was into the music. Remember us talking about the minstrels that Saul found on the road, and how they were playing prophecy and all the frenzy. So she's like that. We see her as a musical person, but also she's definitely involved in the hierarchy of authority, because she talks with Moses about who he married and different things like this, and like Jack talked about, gets in trouble. But so she's a third woman, and if you think about Miriam, her first assignment we see in scripture was to go out and stand beside that swamp and watch that little basket with her baby brother. That was a huge. She could have been in trouble. They could have, I mean, any person could have come along and said, you disobeyed, your family disobeyed, and taken her into custody. I mean, you know, they had authority to do whatever. And then, we know a little about Moses' wife. The Bible does not, a lot of the prophets, we never know their wives. Matter of fact, we know that Ezekiel was married. We know that Isaiah was married because the Lord told him, go marry the prophetess. And so he married a prophetess. But that's all we ever know about her, is she's called a prophetess. We don't know her name. And Ezekiel, we only know her because of Ezekiel chapter 20, which I'm not going to tell you that. If you don't know it, you can go look it up. I think it's chapter 20. But we know some about Moses' wife. Zappora, right? Is that her name?
It is.
Okay, Zappora. And so this was sort of an arranged marriage, you know. Moses went and found Jethro, and Jack talked about that a minute ago. So we also don't know a lot about her, though, but she is present. And sometimes she's gone back with her father, and other times she comes back with Moses. So she is involved, and we see a little bit of movement from her. But we do know that she didn't really like the Jewish custom of circumcision, and that they had fallen away from circumcision for generations because they were in Egypt and God brought them out. But even before that, I think this happened before that. I have to go look at the scripture to make sure, but wasn't that time when Moses' wife got mad at him for circumcision? That was before he even got back to Egypt, wasn't it? I think that was like en route.
Because he didn't do it. God was mad at Moses and going to kill him.
Right.
Because he hadn't circumcised his children.
Right.
So she.
Okay, but when it happened was on their way to Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's a good point, because he grew up in Pharaoh's house, and they would not have been doing circumcision in Pharaoh's house. But that's something else that's interesting, that God made him circumcise his son before he could come back into the Hebrew camp and be part of them, because it was part of the covenant.
And she was mad about it.
Right, she was mad about it. She said, this is a bloody custom.
Yeah.
And she threw something at him. And this is a bloody custom.